Now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Mr Speaker, if someone is pinged by the NHS app, as millions will be over coming weeks, should they isolate? Yes or no?
Mr Speaker, is the answer to that, and I think that everybody understands the inconvenience of being pinged, as he rightly says. Here I am. I wish I was with you in the Commons chamber today. I apologise to everybody in business up and down the land in all kinds of services, public sector or otherwise, who are experiencing inconvenience. We will be switching, as the House knows, to a system based on contact testing rather than contact isolation. But until then, Mr. Speaker, I just must remind everybody that isolation is a vital tool of our defence against the disease. You're 5 times more likely to catch it if you've been in contact with someone that gets it, someone that has it. And of course, even if you have been vaccinated, you can still pass it on, though that risk is reduced. And the overwhelming arguments, Mr. Speaker, are for getting a jab. Everybody should get a jab.
Keir Starmer.
Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister says that everyone understands the government's position as to what you should do if you're pinged by the NHS app. That's a very interesting answer, because the government's all over the place on this. Yesterday, his business minister said the app was an advisory tool only. Another government minister, and I kid you not, said yesterday the app is just to allow you to make informed decisions. What on earth does that mean? Allow you to make informed decisions. And of course, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor spent the weekend trying to dodge isolation altogether. So, Mr Speaker, the British people are trying to follow the rules. How can they, when his ministers keep making them up as they go along?
No, Mr Speaker. If I may laboriously repeat the answer that I gave earlier on to the right honourable gentleman, so just to get it into his head yet again, isolation is a very important part of our armoury against COVID. We're going forward, as everybody knows, to a new system on August the 16th, based on testing. But in the meantime, when you're advised to isolate, to protect others and to protect your family against the spread of the disease, then you should do so. And of course, even more important than the isolation campaign is, of course, the vaccination campaign. 3 million people of the 18 to 30 group still to get one. I think the right honourable gentleman's time would be more usefully employed, if I may say so, encouraging everybody to get vaccinated.
Keir Starmer.
Well, Mr Speaker, everything may be calm from the Prime Minister's country retreat, but back here, the truth is we're heading for a summer of chaos. There's a lot of noise, Mr Speaker, right? I hope they've all got their NHS app on. Mr Speaker, we're heading for a summer of chaos. 1 million children were out of school last week. 1 million. And a huge number of businesses are closing because so many staff are self-isolating. So let me turn to the question of exemptions. Yesterday, the messages coming out of Number 10 about which businesses and workers might be exempt from isolation changed hour by hour. First, yesterday, there was going to be a list, and then there wasn't. And then the Prime Minister's spokesperson said this, and I quote, "We are not seeking to draw lines specifically around who is or who is not exempt." Now, I've read that, and I've reread it several times, Mr Speaker. I haven't a clue what that means. The Road Haulage Association hit the nail on the head when they said this, and I quote, that it was thought up on the hoof without proper organisation or thought. Now, Mr Speaker, I know the Prime Minister likes to govern by 3-word slogans. I think, Mr Speaker, on the hoof might work pretty well. So, last chance before recess. For millions of workers, this matters.
Order. Mr Gullis, I don't need any help or assistance from yourself. The next time you point to your watch, might be better looking at Big Ben outside rather than here. Come on, Keir Starmer.
So, Mr Speaker, last chance before recess. Can the Prime Minister just clear it up? Which workers and which businesses will be exempt from isolating before the 16th of August?
Mr. Speaker, I think this is really pretty feeble stuff from the right honourable gentleman. This is what's going to be a glorious 60th anniversary edition of PMQs. I've given him the answer in a letter that he had earlier on about the businesses and the sectors of industry that we think that it would be sensible now to exempt. But he can't have it both ways, Mr. Speaker. He attacks the self-isolation system. But as far as I understand the position of the right honourable gentleman when it comes to the roadmap, he actually now this week opposes going forward with step 4. I think the right honourable gentleman, the leader of the opposition, is guilty of failing to listen to what I said just now. And it's perfectly obvious that, as I said to him in a letter earlier on, that there are some businesses, some parts of our economy that, of course, need exemptions from the isolation regime because they need to be able to carry on. And for the most part, obviously, people will have to follow the rules. We're changing it on August the 16th, by which time we will have vaccinated many more people. I understand people's frustrations, but this is one of the few real tools that we have in our armoury against the virus. And I really think that in attacking the isolation system, which is what I think the right honourable gentleman is doing, he is being totally inconsistent with his earlier announcement, which seemed to be that we should stay in lockdown. If I understand the position of the Labour Party now, which is different from last week, they now don't want to go ahead with step 4. I think I'm right in that.
Keir.
He talks about inconsistency. 2 hours and 38 minutes to do a massive U-turn on Sunday morning. And then what have we seen in the last few days? He says I didn't listen to his answer. I did listen. I still think he's making it up. We had completely unclear announcement on Monday about exemptions, and contradictory statements all day yesterday. Now we seem to be back to the confused policy of Monday. How on earth the business is meant to plan when the Prime Minister keeps chopping and changing like this? I have to say, even after 15 months of these exchanges, I can't believe that the Prime Minister doesn't see the irony of him spending Freedom Day locked in isolation and announcing plans for a vaccine ID card. I remember when he used to say he'd eat an ID card if he ever had to produce one, and now he's introducing them. So, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to creating confusion, the Prime Minister is a super spreader. So let me try to get some clarity. Why is it okay? Why is it okay to go to a nightclub for the next 6 weeks without proof of a vaccine or a test, and then from September it will only be okay to get into a nightclub if you've got a vaccine ID card?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think the Labour leader traditionally has a choice in a national crisis, and that is whether to get behind the government and to offer constructive opposition, or to try endlessly to oppose for the sake of it and to try to score cheap political points. Everybody can see that we have to wait until the end of September, by which time it's only fair to the younger generation, when they will all have been offered 2 jabs, before we consider something like asking people to be double jabbed before they go into a nightclub. That's blindingly obvious to everybody. It's common sense. And I think most people in this country understand it. Most people in this country want to see the younger generation encouraged to get vaccinations. That is what, with great respect to the right honourable gentleman, he should be doing, rather than trying endlessly to score what I think are vacuous political points.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister keeps asking me if I will support his chaos. No! And I want to bring the Prime Minister back to one of our earlier exchanges in this House. On the 26th of May, I asked the Prime Minister if he'd ever used the words, "COVID is only killing 80-year-olds," or words to that effect. On that day, the Prime Minister pointedly didn't deny using those words. And now we have the proof that he did. We've all now seen the Prime Minister's text message. I quote, "The median age for COVID fatalities is 82. That is above life expectancy." And we have the Prime Minister's conclusion in the same text. So get COVID and live longer. Remind the Prime Minister, over 83,000 people aged 80 or over lost their lives to this virus. Everyone leaving behind a grieving family and loved ones. So will the Prime Minister now apologise for using those words?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, nothing I can say from this dispatch box or from this virtual dispatch box, I should say, or nothing I can do can make up for the loss and the suffering that people have endured throughout this pandemic. And there will, of course, be a public inquiry into what has happened. But I would just remind the right honourable gentleman, when he goes back over the decision-making processes that we had in those very, very difficult and dark times, that these are incredibly tough balancing decisions that you have to take. Again, you have to balance the catastrophe of the disease against the suffering that is caused by lockdowns, the impacts on mental health, the loss of life chances for young people, Mr. Speaker. And what has changed since we were thinking in those ways is, of course, that we have rolled out vaccines faster than any other country in Europe. 96%, Mr. Speaker, of people over 50 now have had a vaccine. 68% of people have had 2 jabs, Mr. Speaker. What we're trying to say to the country today, and I think the single most important serious message is, if you have not yet had your second jab, please come along and get it. And if you're over 50 and you still haven't had your second jab, or over 40, please come and get it as well. And never forget, Mr. Speaker, that if we'd followed the advice of the right honourable gentleman, we would have stayed in the European Medicines Agency and we would never have had the vaccine rollout at all.
Starmer.
Speaker, I think we might need to check that the line to checkers is working, because the Prime Minister's answers have no resemblance to the questions I'm actually asking him. He's given us a list of what he can't do. What he can do, quite straightforwardly, virtually or otherwise, is say sorry.
In these dark times that we find ourselves in, it's all too easy to feel passive and disengaged and hopeless. But there is something you can do. If you like the sound of a fearless, independent media outlet really trying to shine a light where the mainstream doesn't, then do sign up to Byline TV. You can hit the join button on YouTube or subscribe on Patreon. You can be part of driving meaningful change.